on it as I have. I'm 12 or 13 years older than you. But one of the things that I contemplate...
Maybe not after this hearing.
No, I'm sure I'm older. Actually, you're doing quite well. Have you ever contemplated the idea of what your freedom was like 30 years ago and what it is today?
How old was I 30 years ago?
You were 20.
I'm not sure I have ever contemplated that exact
question. Well, I want to tell you a lot of Americans have, and I certainly have. And there's a marked change in this country from when I was 20 to now that I'm 62. And one of the problems with confidence, and the reason I asked you the question, is a lot of Americans are losing confidence because they're losing freedom. They're losing liberty. You'll recall I asked you about the vegetables questions yesterday. That's on the front of a lot of people's mind. Not vegetables, health care. You knew where I was going. The very fact that the government is going to have the ability to take away, mandate what I must buy or must not buy, a very large loss of freedom. And so my basic question comes back to you is that important, that the fact that confidence in all government institutions is at an all-time low in this country? And should we be concerned about it? And should we be trying to right the ship so that we restore that confidence? And I'm not talking in specific rulings, but you would agree that we ought to be trying to build that confidence and to reassure the American public that we actually get it, that we understand the Constitution is the founding document. You've testified many times. I have some problems with some of what you said, but that's the bedrock instrument under which we have. But with a perceived loss of liberty, confidence is declining. And on top of that, as we discussed yesterday, the Commerce Clause and this very expansive view of it as held by the Supreme Court, which is counter to what our founders wrote. There's nobody that can, it started in 1937. It's counter to what our founders wrote. And as it has expanded, liberty has declined. And we've seen that rapidly increase. And it's not just Republican or Democratic institutions, administrations that have overseen that. They've both been guilty. So I just wanted to, whether you'd ever contemplated that, because I think that can give you some insight into what America's concerned about. I don't think judges just go to the bench and look at the Constitution. I think they have to look at the fact that how do we continue this wonderful and grand experiment, and that there are consequences to their actions. Whether it be the consequences of the senator from Rhode Island seeing a conspiracy and sinister in people who think about and believe in the original intent, believe in expanded freedom, not limiting freedom, and believe that what the founders had to say in the Federalist Papers in interpreting the Constitution was of any import. So you've never contemplated any change in the freedom that you've experienced.
Senator, I guess I'll say this to what you said, which is that I believe that confidence in our institutions is terribly important. The confidence in the Supreme Court is terribly important. I do think that the job of a Supreme Court justice is to decide cases. And in deciding cases is not to think about big questions like restoring American confidence, that's more a question and that belongs to the members of this body. I do think that the job of a Supreme Court justice is to listen very carefully to all arguments that are presented.
You chose a phrase when talking about the Second Amendment that you were not sympathetic when discussing someone's claim that D.C.'s handgun ban violated their fundamental pre-existing right to bear arms. And I have a very specific question for you. Do you believe it is a fundamental pre-existing right to have an arm to defend yourself?
Senator Coburn, I very much appreciate how deeply important the right to bear arms is to millions and millions of Americans. And I accept Heller which made clear that the Second Amendment conferred that right upon individuals and not simply collectively.
I'm not asking you about your judicial. I'm asking you, Elena Kagan, do you personally believe there is a fundamental right in this area? Do you agree with Blackstone that the natural right of resistance and self-preservation, the right of having and using arms for self-preservation and defense? He didn't say that was a constitutional right. He said that's a natural right. And what I'm asking you is, do you agree with that?
Senator Coburn, to be honest with you, I don't have a view of what are natural rights independent of the Constitution. And my job as a justice will be to enforce and defend the Constitution and other laws of the United States.
So you wouldn't embrace what the Declaration of Independence says, that we have certain God-given inalienable rights that aren't given in the Constitution, that they're ours alone, and that the government doesn't give those to us?
Senator Coburn, I believe that the Constitution is an extraordinary document. And I'm not saying I do not believe that there are rights pre-existing the Constitution and the laws. But my job as a justice is to enforce the Constitution and the laws.
Well, I understand that. Well, I'm not talking about as a justice. I'm talking about Elena Kagan. What do you believe? Are there inalienable rights for us? Do you believe that?
Senator Coburn, I think that the question of what I believe as to what people's rights are outside the Constitution and the laws, that you should not want me to act in any way on the basis of such a belief.
I would want you to always act on the basis of the belief of what our Declaration of Independence says.
I think you should want me to act on the basis of law. And that is what I have upheld to do if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed.